Thank you very much. A very interesting presentation. Is not the typical statement, but because there are several comments about everyone. Just starting in the opposite order. So last presentation, I think that you point out two aspects: neural rights and emotional detection are not exactly the same things. We can have emotional detection without neuroimagining or neurotechniques. And so are two different issues. And regarding the AI Act, I think it's quite strong, the statement that we want to test emotional detection on the most vulnerable. The AI Act is an exercise of balancing between different kind of tension and interest. And there is a clear interest among some sector, for instance, policy and Ministry of Interior, etc. And of course, they have this kind of push in this direction. So I should be a bit more careful with the AI Act. And I fully agree with you about the fact that we don't need neural rights, although there are a big lobby in favor of that. About the presentation of Antonio, personally, I'm very critical. How you can operationalize that? So, from a legal perspective, we can discuss about the personality. But what it means? Huh? Who creates a personality for each algorithm that is created? And is it necessary when we already have at least a system of liability based on the company that are behind? And in this sense, also the discussion about the delegation and the part that you mentioned about how to delegate. We delegate not necessarily to AI. We already delegate. When you use a car, there is an ABS system that acts autonomously. It's not AI-based. So delegation is part of our approach already. I think that you stressed the important point about liability. But it's also important to consider the AI Act reverse the paradigm. It's not the case that the Act has been approved and the liability directive has not been approved. Because the idea is we have to prevent the risk. If we prevent the risk, liability is the end of the system. Okay. So a very limited number of cases. We adopt the same approach in drugs, in data protection, etc. The result is that we are very few cases. Of course, I fully agree. In the few cases, it will be very complicated. But we have to keep in mind this. And the first presentation, I think, was the best from my perspective, because I like interdisciplinary dialogue. And in this sense, you mentioned just in the last part of your presentation the fact of the technology mediation. Technology? Mediation. Yes. And technology mediation, I think, is the key element, because in many cases we find this distinction between human and machine, but there are humans behind the machine. So the question is, if there are humans behind the machine, this strategy to humanize machine, to talk about hallucination, etc., is not just a communication strategy, but it is even more. And so what is the policy goal from your perspective of this strategy? And last point, it's true that machines are not humans, but are not exactly like humans also in terms of errors. The machine creates their own errors that are different from the machine, from the human's errors. And this, of course, creates problems. Thank you.
If I may, thank you very much for all the comment. I see the point that you refer of delegation in many other techniques, devices that are surrounding us. But probably what is absolutely distinctive in the case of AI system is that we are delegating decision-making. And this is a purely delegation of part of our autonomy. Because unlike all these devices that in a way we rely on for the purpose of mitigating risks, for example, in the case of AI system, when they are learning system, when they in a way incorporate the level of autonomy that the idea of AI system incorporate, the decision that is going to be attributed to us is going to be adopted within a certain level of unpredictability. So it is a pure delegation of part of the autonomy. Naturally, we are playing with words and terminology that in a way sometimes they are not fitting well. Because we could say, if this AI system is not a legal person, if it has no total autonomy, how can we talk about delegation? That's why, in my opinion, this interplay, this tension between human autonomy and AI agency required, in a way, releasing from and freeing from certain burdens that we have from our human-centric legal system. So for me, delegation here is definitely different and much more complex than our traditional delegation of risk, because we are delegating decisions that are going to be adopted, taking into consideration by the AI system a number of circumstances. So that is, for me, definitely an inflection point compared to other situations that we already have. Thank you for the point. Thank you very much.
I realize that my proposal will find many critics. That's very good point. I think that we have to live in a real time. This discussion has no sense 5 years ago. We have to look the advances and the evolution of these artificial intelligences. Nowadays, we have the generative artificial intelligence machines. Then we have to look, and I prefer to try to draft a proposal instead of the contemplative wait-and-see policy. Of course, there are many details that are not easy. Then, is it possible to the shareholders to create a company and to leave it, or to release, to buy something and put it on the market and receive some money from the incomes that this legal entity produces? Of course, it is not easy. Maybe this could be an option. Yes, some people create a legal entity, a legal person with the only element of this artificial intelligence, or robot plus artificial intelligence, and after that they release and they abandon the legal entity. This could be an issue. I think that we have to keep an eye in the evolution of this, because as we couldn't discuss this 1 year or 2 years ago, it is not easy to draft in advance all the details, but of course, I realize that there are some difficulties in order to put it into practice. Maybe the shareholders set up a company with this only element, with this purpose, and after that, or they release, the idea of this moldable concept is to set up or to draft a tool that can be a limit for the financial liability, which at the same time provides certainty for consumers and at the same time promotes innovation. That's the aim or the purpose of this proposal, to create these legal entities.
Yes. So thank you for your observations. Of course, there are emotion detection systems that process data that are not biometric data. They're not neural data. But I found these issues particularly interesting, the issues raised by the application of AI on data collected through neural technologies, because neural technologies are evolving at a pace that is unbelievable. The AI Act draws a red line, so we all appreciate that. But I think that this partial ban could be perceived as a signal, and since the European Union presents itself as a game changer, so I'm worried that this might be a dangerous precedent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that there are a lot of topics. I also have questions, but let's try to do my work, right? Trying to disentangle things, concepts, and so on as far as I can, and I think it's useful. I think that many of the questions are pretty much related with what kind of agency we are attributing to machines, and what kind of agency we attribute to human beings, and is beyond the normative legal instruments we develop in order to live in a society, right? In a human society, because this is what we want. Only I don't know if somebody here thinks something different. Anyway, so philosophers usually in anthropology, probably social sciences too, usually distinguish between among actions, operations, functions. So machines, we do innovate technology, we do build machines in order to perform functions. And in that sense, of course, they will perform much better than us, and so on. But the kind of agency of a machine, which is a functional one, philosophically speaking, represent to some extent one aspect, which is very concrete and very specific, dimension of human actions, of human operations, of human behaviors. So my point is, and that's why, since Aristotle, machines, he was already able to think of robots. So were thought in terms of subjects, but only by accidents. So by analogy, by accidents in Latin, by analogy in philosophical terms. So again, I think that if we follow this line of reasoning, I would not say, for example, that we are delegating or we can delegate at all decisions. We are delegating functions. And in this sense, the human agency is always very specifically characterized by intentions, which go far beyond actions as we usually understand the actions, right? We can, emotions, for example, this is an interesting topic, right? Example, case study, yeah. Because we can pretend to smile, or we can pretend to express satisfaction, or I'm bothered by whatever, right? Machines are just confused, confused not in the human sense. That is for the machines just a lack of data, which is equal to all the other data they are able to use and to collect and to organize in cluster. So, and the errors, the point of errors is also important. Errors for humans are also experienced. Machines do not experience at all. When we use the language of learning, we are saying something important and new, but the language is not fair, in my opinion, as I was discussing for the language of intelligence, right? Because learning also for human beings is not simply collecting data and organizing data in a very fast, efficient way, which is something we want to delegate machines to do because we build them for that purpose. But humans learn, and by learning, we understand something. So we are able, for example, to name things in the real world, something that machines are not able to do by definition. When I was interested in the case you mentioned, when a machine is able, for example, to find a role or a rule within a specific action field, and is able to transfer to another field. This is not a semantic shift. It is a recognition of overlapping patterns. So I do see your point from, I don't know enough about your field, so that's why it's so important this context. Because to some extent, I wouldn't be worried about admitting a different legal, I don't like maybe the term subject, but philosophically speaking, so you will find the terms. But it seems to me that it would be, but this is open to discussion, please. This is my thought now. It's quite close to the rules we have within a game. So we can attribute rules, and we can judge how different players perform within that given game. But the game is human, and the values within the game or outside the game are humans. In that sense, technology mediation can be disruptive, right? Depending on how we understand and our own life, emotions, in relationships, behaviors, context, and so on. So it's important because as far as we introduce or reshape, reorganize the instrument, tools, cognitive tools, practical tools, normative tools, and so on, I think we are also shaping our relationships and the perception of our social bonding, right? Mm-hmm. So we are doing an important, so that's, and definitely the point of the terms, as you said, and as I said from the very beginning, I think that terms are really important in this scenario. And that's why my suggestion was just to avoid to use the term of intelligence applied to machines and talking about intelligent systems done by humans plus machines, where, anyway, I don't, maybe there are other reactions and comments, because I think that there are a lot of points that are...
May I take the lead?
Sure.
And maybe just continue your
Yes,
discussion.
please.
Another level, certainly, that I think we have seen in this panel as well is the use of the proper technical terminology that we need in different fields. Because, of course, when I listen to your presentation, is definitely fascinating to see how the terminology that we need in the legal field. And we need, because it's not simply the term, we are conceptualizing elements that are dragging a number of legal consequences. So when we talk about, of course, legal person, when we talk about autonomy, when we talk about legal consent with legal effect, that is plenty of value in the legal field. And that is the reason why, in many cases, there are discrepancies between different fields in order to talk about, for example, this idea that we're discussing of delegation, the idea of decision, for example, why we need this idea of decisions, because decision means, for example, that we are concluding a contract. And therefore, this action, this function that the machine is performing, if I may say, on my behalf, in order to explain what happened, is going to be the consent to conclude a contract, according to which I am going to be bound by. I'm going to be the contracting party.
Yeah. But may I?
Please.
Sorry, please interrupt anytime you think it's, we need a coffee. We will need a coffee at some point. Okay, the point is, from my perspective, you are right, I do see your point, our point, right? Language is important, different fields, different disciplines, we have to align or to specify. At the same time, the challenge is global now.
Agree.
So we do need to make this effort of making explicit, at least in my opinion, what are the principles and what are the specific content of those principles we want not to negotiate, right, in order to converge on a reliable, satisfactory, fair bunch of norms. Let me use this language. If not, I think that everything is so accelerated that we will get loose in the forest, right, of a lot of technological tools, suggestion proposals. And I also think that this pressure is not only introduced because it is technologically possible. It's not a problem of the engineers. It's a problem of the economic system creating, and maybe of very few people in the world managing a lot of data, pushing and creating expectations through the digital technologies that are really constraining or, even more, I would say it's not only constraining, but maybe it's a real manipulation in many cases, right? And that's part of the vulnerability I would really address, right? How can we prevent or how can we educate human beings to dwell in this world in which we have so much of this technological mediation, accelerating things, and also, for example, making an effort not to recognize like accessibility or acceleration, which are values in functional terms, in engineering terms, right, as values over other values maybe. So this is anyway, again, I don't want to take the floor for a long time. Amalia, we think we probably have
coffee break.
Yeah. But
20
keep
20
comments and
minutes.
questions for all the speakers, please, for the coffee break and for the other sessions.
20 minutes.